of all kinds, in the Day 9/11 Truth movement and all kinds of movements. And I don't disagree with any of these people because we need exposure everywhere. Our choice is, of course, focused upon the idea of the church, because, of course, that's where I learned about this problem, was as a deacon in a Southern Baptist church. I realized that my church was actually campaigning for war. I didn't want to see the bombing of Iraq in 1991.
Well, I mean, wait, just a minute. I mean, we have the choice of voting for Songbird McCain or Barack Obama, and now you got the vice presidential candidate chosen by McCain, Sarah Palin, taking over the Tea Parties and calling for war on Iran. Let's bomb Iran. Let's bomb Iran. She wants to turn the Tea Parties to this.
Yes,
Now, what? Let me also share up on my website. Up on my website, I've got this information here, and I think you folks need to understand this. I try to be fair, Charles. You know, I try to. Just as I mentioned Henry McCow and Gordon Duff and Benjamin Friedman, Aaron Russo, these were great Jewish men who believed in freedom in America to a certain extent. And by the way, just for you, a little quick update, you may understand that Homeland Security is basically controlled by Zionist organizations, and now, in other words, Jews control Homeland Security. And now the story just came out that Jews don't have to go through TSA anymore, according to Janet Napolitano. But I try to be fair here, so you folks out there don't think I'm just bad-mouthing the Jews out there, that I'm some hate-filled anti-Semite. Let me tell you what Rabbi Reichhorn said, speaking at the funeral of Grand Rabbi Simeon ben Judah. And the date on this is important, folks. It's 1869. Thanks to the terrible power of our Jewish international banks, we Jews have forced the Christians into wars without number. Wars have a special value for Jews. Since Christians massacre each other and make more room for us Jews, wars are the Jews' harvest. The Jew banks grow fat on Christian wars. Over 100 million Christians as of 1869 have been swept off the face of the earth by wars, and the end is not yet. What's the total now? About 250 million? Are you still with me, Chuck?
Yeah, I am. Well, if you're starting to count the Russian Revolution and things like that, yeah, the numbers are staggering. Coming down to our banking systems, and we have enormous control there, and we're facing unprecedented crisis right now as we look at the system that is really collapsing. It's being held up by threads, and threads tied to threads. And of course, this is all the result of wars, and mostly the result of wars. The cost of war has been what's destroyed our money, essentially. And so we're looking at this crisis now, in which the whole world's financial system is really crumbling around us. It could last a while, or it might not. What will then be the response of the American church? Is the American church going to stand up and continue to support the people that have brought this upon us, or are they actually going to turn back to Christian precepts? You stated, Clay, that you've given evidence that the Zionist movement worked to capture the churches. We say the same thing. We say we focus on starting in 1909 with 1908 with Cyrus I. Schofield, but of course there were predecessors to that movement as well. We choose to start there because it's so easy to trace that. We can actually just take the books and Bibles they've written and unravel them. And for your listeners, if you go to our website and watch the PowerPoint presentation there, and there are some links to DVDs that we've published that are free, you can go and watch them. We actually show you how this was done with the Bibles from our WHTT.org website.
You know, I have, over the years, I've always had my own business. I've always been in publishing for many, many years. Published an underground magazine back in the 60s to speak out against the war. And in a way, Chuck, I think the people of my profession are basically the most important factor in what has been an ongoing war, a war against the American people. The government will even tell you. The government will even tell you, yeah, so we're going to be in a long war. It may even be the Cold War. And the enemy's weak. The enemy don't have helicopters and planes. They don't have that. They're weak, so they're going to use unconventional tactics. So we got to use unconventional tactics. And that's a quote from Colonel John Brinkerhoff in his first briefing of law enforcement and Homeland Security. This was a lecture given at Sandia Labs up at Kirtland Air Force Base, and he's talking to law enforcement, telling them we're going to need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people in case of a terrorist attack, in case of an earthquake of significant magnitude like along the New Madrid fault line. And wait a minute. You know, we didn't need any troops in New York when they blew up 2 buildings. There wasn't no Americans were rioting or looting. Nobody's done that. So what do we need troops for? Well, because, you know, some of them just won't follow orders. Yeah, some of us won't line up on the Kmart parking lot to get something stuck in our arms. Yeah, we won't do that. Now, the things are getting tighter here. We've been reporting on this for 20 years. I've been telling people this is what's going to happen. This is what FEMA is going to become. This is what NAFTA is going to become. This is what GATT's going to become. This is what the bankers are doing to you.
Yeah. I wish we could say we were exaggerating and that this was a fantasy, and that we could all go to sleep and forget it. And tomorrow we wake up and say, "Oh my God, I'm glad that dream was over." But unfortunately, we can't say that. The more we see, the more real it becomes, and the more it calls upon us to do something about it, and the more difficult it is to figure out what to do. Since we started our movement to try to awaken people to what's going on in our churches, I've learned the hard way that it's very hard to find churches that you can deal with. It's very hard to find churches that are not inculcated with of course Zionism, and that is the entry into the church is Zionism. The entry into the church. Of course, there were other entries into the church too. We know about those, tax exempt status and things like that. But the direct challenge to Christianity has been done through this mechanism of Christian Zionism, which has caused people to believe an errant theology. That theology being that some country, someplace, is holy. They've created one holy country out of all the, how many countries are there? 200?
Well, there's 190 some odd, and we are sending foreign aid to 150 of them, including every communist country. The communism has taken over. And by the way, let me point out that the Russians, the ones that were left after they killed 60 million of Russians after the Bolshevik Revolution, referred to communism as Judaism for the masses. And you know, if you start going back into the roots of Zionism and read the Talmud, what a horror story that is, isn't it?
Well, the practices of Zionism are not much different, and Zionism and Bolshevism are politically very similar. There is a similarity there. The action, if you go to the state of Israel today, you see these elements at work right there. Very polished and professional, but it is going on. And of course, all we have to do, if we want to know where we don't want to end up, take a look at the Palestinian people who are citizens of the state of Israel. Now, I'm not talking about the Palestinians who live in the little bits of West Bank that's left, or in the Gaza Strip. Now, I've been to the Gaza Strip. It was been 8 years ago, and I lived there for a little while, and I saw firsthand what it's like to live inside a prison camp. And that prison camp actually had a fence around it on three sides, and the sea on the other side, and ships and boats that you could occasionally see out there patrolling the coastline, which were Israeli. So they prevented people from getting in a boat or on a waterboard and somehow pedaling out of Gaza and getting into Egypt, let's say. These people, 1.5 million of them, are literally prisoners inside of a fence, literally in a fence. And yet the world doesn't even know it or recognize it. We were horrified when we found out that there were gulags in Russia where they had human beings penned up behind fences, and that there were many, many of these gulags, these prison camps. Well, we have that today in Gaza. It's the microcosm of the entire system. It's the one remaining fenced-in prison that has 1.5 million totally innocent people living inside it. They're born there, they die there, they're buried there. And occasionally the Israeli helicopters come over and make an example out of some who they think are leaders. They simply assassinate them with American-made weapons. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the raids going on there, and in our videos that we produced, we show the handheld photographs that I took in 2002, right after the World Trade Center bombing in Gaza, of the bombing of the Palestinian people in their own cities and towns and camps and homes. During the 1 month war that took place about 4 years ago now, when Israel went into Gaza and went in for the purpose of annihilating the leadership that they thought was a problem to them. Most people don't know that the people of Gaza had managed to somehow build a zoo for their children. They even had a lion in it, and a camel, and a bunch of other animals. This is inside a prison. These people had actually created a recreation zoo for their own children, had a petting zoo where they could pet little animals. And people that lived in this enclave with Zionism all around it could go to the zoo and take their kids there and let them see what a cow looked like, what a goat looked like, and a pet a llama. And when Israel went into Gaza, they not only killed over 1,000 people, but they killed every animal in the zoo and left them all to rot when they left. This is Zionism at work. It's more than an attack on our bodies. It's more than an attack on our money. It's an attack on our system, our way of life. The Israelis did not want the Palestinian people to be able to point to a zoo and say, we have a culture here where our children are actually educated. They wanted to destroy that, and they did. And it is a fact that they killed every animal in the zoo.
Why is it, there's been some talk, speculation, that maybe we've been fighting this battle for a few 100,000 years, that perhaps the Neanderthals that we faced as the Cro-Magnon men evolved into what we term as Jews or Khazars today, which is where they kind of ended up. Any possibility that might be accurate?
Well, I don't know. I don't see anything scriptural in that, but you and I are a great combination, Clay, because you keep wanting to go back and I keep wanting to go forward. And I know that you want to go forward too.
I do. You know, and to me, the answer is there in the Bible without the religions. You know, I represent. I represent the Way Church and Timothy Bible College.
Okay.
And Dr. Jake Wade, who has been under attack ever since he's been on my show because he supports me. And I did come up with,
that's for sure. And that I certainly wouldn't argue with. Pastors who stand up and actually speak out against Christian Zionism are in trouble. And we, in dealing with our pastor and even dealing with our friends and relatives, have to realize the problems they have. If that pastor is paid, and there's a board of deacons in the church, like the one I was a deacon in, Southern Baptist Convention Church, if the pastor would have come out and made comments like I'm making today, he wouldn't have to talk about Neanderthal man or anything, but all he'd have to do is come out and say things like I said today. He would be very quickly, in the Southern Baptist Convention, he would be out in a flash. There would not even be a hearing to give him a saying. He would be in deep trouble. Of course, the Southern Baptists say that each church is independent, and to some degree they are. But they always have boards of deacons that are evangelical, dispensational, Schofieldites. Essentially, my friends and allies in the church I was in were wonderful friends. I met with them all the time. They were fine men of all different calibers and qualities, and with a lot of quality. But they were influenced by this idea, and they actually had been taught and believed that Israel is sacred. And you've got to get that in your head, that whenever you go into a church, if somehow Israel is sacred in that church, then you have a Christian Zionist problem, and you've got to address that very carefully. You've got to be so almost circumspect in the way you approach these people. You have to basically use your Bible. I say carry a New Testament at all times. Never be without a New Testament in your pocket when you go among fellow men. Not the big Schofield Reference Bible under your arm, but a little New Testament, Jesus' words. And then try to get people thinking about what would Jesus say about these things we're seeing. What would Jesus say about the Israelis killing the animals in the Gaza zoo? Would Jesus care about the animals? Well, I don't know if he would or not. I don't think he had that occasion. But I think he would say that that is an abuse of the children. God, he said, bring the little children to me. I think Jesus would say, no, you can't kill the children's animals. You have to bring this down to an extremely simple case in order to deal with your son or your grandson or your father. You've got to get them, leave them with ideas that they can't shake from their head. Very, very simple ones. And then you have to rely upon the fact that they really are believers. They really want to believe in God. They really want to believe that Jesus was real and that his words are real. And you rely upon that when you talk to them and give them a little bits of Jesus' words out of your New Testament and ask them how they explain their beliefs, that it's okay for the Palestinian people to be held in a jail in Gaza, 1,300,000 people, and not fed, given no water, having their sewage cut off, having their electricity cut off, put in a position where they can't even live like human beings. Who would do that? Would Jesus do that? Would Jesus accept people who do that? These are the sort of ways that you have to approach it. And then you have to be awfully careful of your facts, because I've just said some things about Gaza that if I said them in most churches, they would look at me and they would say, it never happened. It's not that way. I've been to Israel. I've been toured Israel. There's nothing like that in Israel. You see, the state of Israel is incredibly clever at brainwashing millions of tourists who come there every year. They don't see Gaza. They don't see the jets flying overhead. They don't see the Apache helicopters at night shooting these Hellfire missiles that will hit a bicycle on the move. and have. They've actually shot people off motorcycles with them. They don't see any of that. They go to Israel and they're treated to a wonderful experience where the Israelis are the humans, and then they're exposed to a little bit of exposure to some subculture of the Palestinians that is so poor that they have garbage in their streets. And they refer to that then as these people, how these people live. If you ride with an Israeli taxi driver and you say, I'd like to go to the Palestinian section, he'll say, why do you want to see those animals? That is literally the words that you get almost every time. The reference to them is animals. This is what is taught by the Zionist movement in Israel about the Palestinian people. They're trained that if you're a American and you come there and you happen to get into the taxi driver of one of these Jewish taxi drivers, and you ask about Palestine, that's the way they'll be referred to. When I went into Gaza, even the soldiers talked to me that way. They said to me, why do you want to go in there? They said it in terms of as if you were crawling into a toilet. They said it in terms of, why don't you turn around when you still have a chance? I had Israeli citizens, I tell them where I was going, I had Israeli citizens say, they'll kill you. The Gazans, as soon as they find out you're an American, they'll kill you. Nobody comes out of there alive. Don't walk in there. I was told that. There is a sterilizing policy that goes on to treat any tourist who comes to Israel, to train him to believe that the Palestinians are nothing, that they're not even human. So when you talk to your family, when you talk to your church people, when you approach them, you've got to keep all of this in mind and work one-on-one very carefully and try to win one person at a time. And they will see the truth if you can show them a few simple things that they just can't get out of their mind. We're coming to the time, if I may kind of give my closing thought, we are coming to a time when Americans will listen. They would not listen during the good era of the 1960s, when Clay was probably already busy. They would not listen during the 70s, 80s, 90s, the greatest days of the stock market boom that we've just gone through. Most Americans don't listen because they have been anesthetized with good times. But as good times must and are going away, Americans are going to listen. Church people will listen. We'll have a better chance. I'm optimistic that we will live long enough to see the day when people are listening. Whether we'll see the change, I don't know, Clay. What do you think?
I don't know. You know, I've been talking about this Zionist plot, you know, since I read the Protocols of Elders of Zion. Don't matter what who wrote it, does it? Don't matter. They're dead.
Matter.
They're dead. So we have to deal with what's happening today, and the protocols are being followed to the letter.
They are. They're being carried out in front of our very eyes. It's undeniable that the things in the protocols were happening then, and they're happening now.
It's you know, the answers that I found, and I'm trying to encourage people to do this, is get out of the cities. Work with your neighbors, and grow your own food, generate your own electricity, do what the Bible said. The Bible warned you about Mystery Babylon, and they're getting scared because at the time the Bible says come out of her. Now, if you grow your own food, generate your own electricity, get back to the foundation of every civilization, the self-sufficient family farm, do what the Israelites did in Egypt, to solve the famines. And there's famines going on right now, folks. There's the weather is out of control, the fires are out of control, and the military dependents are being told to prepare a bug-out bag for the arrival of Planet X, which may have been the cause of the floods thousands of years ago. Now, is that an answer? Now, I'll get all kinds of... Well, the zoning won't let you do that. Well, you know, they've got rules against growing tomatoes in your backyard, you know. What, is this an answer? I mean, we've got millions of Christians that have been bamboozled by these Zionists, by the Schofields out there. And I you know, again, you know, I'll get some... My friends that are really into their version of Christianity will get upset with me for saying anything like this, but you know, I've had preachers come up and say, "Have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Master?" No, I don't accept anybody as my Lord or Master. I don't believe that's what Jesus taught. I believe Jesus told us we could do everything that He does and more, because we are all sons of God. We all have God inside of us. So why do we really need to go to some stone church to listen to some bamboozled, befuddled, programmed preacher try to tell us that the people that are killing us with their pharmaceuticals, with their drugs? I mean, come on. Israel runs the drug. The Mossad and the CIA run the drugs into this country. And all of the drugs that they bring in and sell to you and your children do not cause as much death and destruction as the pharmaceuticals issued by your doctors.
May I say something?
Yes, sir.
You know, I know we're running out of time.
Oh, we got 4 minutes.
On our website, whtt.org, stands for weholdthesetruths.org. We have a series of recent papers. The latest one just went up today, and it's about the current law that's being passed called the Farm Bill, and it's about ethanol. And ethanol, of course, the method being used to control food in America is the creation of the ethanol scam. That's a mouthful to say in one word. We've written a lot about it because we think it takes away our freedoms. It's putting us in a position where we are forced to buy ethanol that's made out of food. And if the food was not being made into ethanol, there would be enough food. Believe me, there would be absolutely no possibility of a shortage of milk or beef or wheat or anything else if it were not for this huge ethanol scam. We'd like you to look at our website and call these worthless congressmen of ours in the House of Representatives and tell them to kill this agricultural bill that they're now getting ready to pass. It is all explained in our papers on ethanol. There's a whole series of them there, and you'll find them on our website at WHTT, like William Henry Tom, weholdthesetruths.org, or on my website, charlesecarlson.com. And make that call, even though we're tired of calling these people and we don't trust them and we don't believe them. We don't think they'll listen to us. Call them anyway about this issue, because this is one of these tomatoes in the backyard issues. This is about food. It's about having enough to get by. It's about subsistence, and it's about starvation in places like Gaza and Egypt and lots of places where there's already a shortage of food. It's all over this ethanol scam. It's one of the latest, worst, and obvious of these efforts to control us by controlling our food. Something we've been worried about for a long time.
Well, that's why I've suggested you could do, and I've got films on my website of a woman that lives up in upstate New York, and she grows enough food in her backyard to feed her whole neighborhood. Sells it to her neighbors. Yeah. So we can do that.
I think you should farm your front yard. Why put water on your front yard to raise grass that just costs you expensive water. Why not plow that up and make a garden out of it?
You know, they're discovering that the methods of farming that we've been using for years.
To a large section of archive programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there.
Ask questions about 9/11.
Here we go. You know, Chuck, I've been ripped off a lot over the last 20 years since I started Free American. It's never been by Jews. It's been by people pretending to be Christians. And I've said, well, wait a minute. You know, wait a minute. Have you been saved, Clay? Have you been saved?